Hey, everybody. This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. I am the host of Hater Radio, a college football podcast, which is now live streaming here on Facebook Live. I'm here with my co host, Ian Gibson, on the phone. Ian, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, except for the college football playoff this coming week, next week.
Yeah, so we actually did this show already, which my error, user error on this, but we did it, but I didn't hit the live button, so we weren't able to actually um, broadcast it. We did it in error, and I feel bad because I wasted Ian's time, and I know how late it is on the East Coast right now. But Ian is a good sport, and he's doing it again, so what we're going to do here in this episode is we're going to talk about a little bit about the recruiting, about a little bit about the Gator Bowl game in Las Vegas that I actually was able to attend, um, and specifically about the college football playoff and the two matchups coming up next week. So first, let's talk about recruiting. Ian, a very good day for Florida. USF had a really good day as well. Um, Anything that stands out from you from recruiting that was newsworthy?
At least, again, it's the early signing day period, so it's not the easiest thing to judge, the whole class when it's this early in the process. But so far, it is looking much better than previous years for Florida. Obviously, with when Sloan was in, and wasn't as much of a priority to recruit at an elite level. But now, you're seeing the commitments. Again, Jalen Rashada would probably be the biggest one. Kelby Collins from Alabama as well. These, commitments, especially within the state of Florida, a lot of IMG guys too. It's at least very good to see, this kind of impact. They definitely had some misses. Miami McLean would be the biggest one. But I would say so far it's been a good recruiting class so far. They still have ways to go before the final signing day period. But it looks like they're in position to add to it, especially through the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, we talked about it in the earlier broadcast that didn't go out, but there's a lot to still come in for Florida. A lot of transfers to shore up, and there's still the official signing day period, which that signing day is in February. So there's a lot to happen from here until now. Florida still has several spots to fill up. We'll see then what happens and what the class actually ends up. Secondly, I wanted to talk about the bowl game real quick before we move on to the playoff. Florida loses 30-3. The game was never close. It's a real shame that the season ended the way it did. But your thoughts on that game before we move on to the college football playoff games?
I'm definitely not surprised. I mean, I knew, you had all the, opt-outs. You had, Jack Miller making his first start. They were the underdogs, and Oregon State was clearly the better team. Even with healthy, Oregon State would definitely, I would assume, give them a tough time and probably pull out the win. But this was kind of the equivalent, I felt like, when, Florida went to play Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl in 2020.
Oh, yeah.
There were just so many opt-outs. It's tough to gauge. It is disappointing. I was expecting, at least, wouldn't say expecting, I was at least hoping to, at least score a touchdown in it. But it's clear that they just were not, ready, prepared for this. They did not have, enough bullets against the army of Oregon State, shall we say, in this game. Oregon State, clearly the better team and the rightful winners. But yeah, I agree. 3 straight losses to end the year. It's a disappointing finish for the year.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, they had the opportunity to win the Vanderbilt and Florida State game, where they actually were competitive in both of those games. And if they win those, they're 8-4, go to a bowl game. I don't know if AR would have played then. He may not have, anyways. But potentially, if he did and they won that game, they would have been 9-4. 9-4 is a completely different story than 6-7. I mean, that's 9-4 is inside the top, 15 at that point. So it's a real shame that the season ended the way it did, but it's not really the worst thing in the world because, the recruiting is getting better. They're on the right path. Billy is getting his guys, and hopefully next year and the years after that, that it'll be much more of competitive. And also with the playoff expanding, 12 teams, that makes it a lot easier for a team like Florida to get in more often than not. And so, this might be the next year or two, the last couple of times that Florida doesn't make the playoff, because from here on out, they're more than likely going to be a 9-10 win team, and that'll likely get you into the playoff. Okay, so speaking of the playoff, let's talk about these matchups. We've got two very good matchups, both next Saturday, January 31st, New Year's Eve. The first matchup is TCU going up against Michigan. Just a very solid matchup between two very good teams. Probably, a matchup that we've all thought was possible all year. And really, TCU got lucky that they didn't get voted out of the playoff. And it's great for all of us because the fact that TCU now has a chance to redeem themselves from that loss against K-State in the Big 12 championship. um, I like TCU in this game a lot. I like TCU's stubbornness, their never say die attitude about their games, their ability to stay, right there with a team. Like the Baylor game where they needed to score late. They got the field goal team on at the last second and they kicked the field goal and they won. To the Texas game, which was a low scoring game, to, throughout the year, TCU has just shown that they know how to win. And even though, yes, they lost to Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game, they lost in overtime and they barely lost to them. In the year and during the season, they actually played pretty well against Kansas State and beat them. So I think they're capable of beating any team in the country. And with this Michigan team being a team that is very defensive orientated, they're going to struggle to move the ball, but I think eventually they'll be able to solve their defense and take control of the game in the fourth quarter. But Ian, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think between this matchup? Who has the better position? Who has the upper hand between these two teams?
Yeah, I mean, both these teams, like you said, it's going to be a very interesting matchup because it's such a clash of styles. You have a very, offense, high flying team of TCU against a very, old school, power heavy defense and power run offense. To the days of Blake Carr in the '90s and Roshan Beckler in the '70s and '80s. What you expect from a kind of championship caliber Wolverines team. It's going to be, interesting because TCU's toughest defense, doing the research that they played, was Texas. Actually, was the toughest defense they played all year. And now you have to play Michigan, which has been, hip-hopping between, 1 and 2 of number 1 overall. They've been consistently in the top 5 of overall defense. So now you got to find a way to break through that against a season where defensively there has not been a lot of adversity against them for TCU. But as I've said, and we've seen all year, this team finds a way to win. Somehow, some way, they find a rabbit in the hat and they'll pull it out. But it's going to be interesting now because Michigan have a very suffocating defense, and they have had some games where they've slept on Maryland and Illinois coming particularly come to mind. But for Michigan, um, the defense is going to be what's key and able to kind of stop these home run plays that we've seen TCU have so much of the year. Is that if they can prevent the big play and getting pressure on Max Duggan, I mean, that's going to help, but it's really going to come down to the secondary because the pressure can only do so much, and we've seen that he's calm under the pocket, even under the pressure. It's up to the secondary to find a way to get the ball deflected or batted down, or find a way to prevent it getting into the hands of any of the TCU wide receivers. For Michigan's offense, obviously very run oriented. They have the best rushing attack, one of the best rushing attacks in the country, and hopefully Blake Corum will be healthy. I still say he's the best running back in the country, but Edwards is not a bad replacement at all. Did a very good job in the games he's been in. Had a great game against Ohio State. And that's one in particular too, is that Ohio State did a very good job of gashing to the outside line and cutting in, and we'll see if they can be able to control the line of scrimmage. If Michigan can control the line of scrimmage, they're going to be running up and down the field, no problem all game. So it might be necessary for TCU to find a way to make the most of every possession they have.
Yeah, and I think they're capable, obviously with, the bevy of wide receivers that they have that are very speedy and, they'll take advantage of the situation that arises. I think that Michigan's defense, is capable, but I still think TCU has the ability to take advantage of that defense. And like I said, earlier when we did the earlier broadcast, that it just feels like TCU will take advantage of it because the fact that they lost that Kansas State game, and just like I'll say with the Ohio State team as well, losing these last games before this probably helps them more than anything else. I think, winning always like hides your weaknesses. So, teams that go undefeated for a very long time, they're willing to overlook their weaknesses when it comes to what they're doing to win. The teams that lose have to really look in amongst themselves and say, what are we doing wrong? What can we fix? And I think TCU and Ohio State together took this time from, the last several weeks working on what will make them better. I think TCU obviously needs to do a better job defensively, and I think that'll be key in this game if that they can actually get some stops, which I think Michigan's offense is weak enough that TCU can make enough stops. And I think that'll be probably the biggest difference in that game, is because TCU has the offensive firepower to overcome Michigan's defense, but I don't think Michigan's offense has enough offensive power as far as passing attack. They can run the ball, yes. Blake Corum and Edwards are amazing. Or Davidson. Is it Davidson?
Edwards and Corum.
Edwards, okay. Edwards and Corum both are amazing running backs, and it's 50-50 right now if Corum's going to play. But regardless, Edwards is a very strong running back, and he can take up the ball if need be. But I don't think J.J. McCarthy is that capable of a passing quarterback. He's average at best. He had a great day against Ohio State, but I think it was largely to do with Ohio State's stubbornness to play man against him. For whatever reason, they probably should have played zone, because if they played zone, they would have put him in a position to have to play the receivers open, and I think because the man coverage was falling down so much that Michigan was able to get open. But I don't know. I don't think that highly of McCarthy. I think that he is their weakest link on the team, and I think that TCU can take advantage of that if they can get pressure, force him into mistakes. That then they could take advantage on offense. Okay. Anything else from this game before we move on to the next game?
No, hit all the nails on the head there.
Okay, cool. All right, so next game, Ohio State, Georgia. I have been hoping that Ohio State would play Georgia all year. This has been the two most complete teams in the entire country. There's no other two teams in the entire country that have both sides of the ball as good as both of these teams perform on that. So I'm so glad that Georgia has to go up against this team because it's finally someone that can compete with them. And I feel that Ohio State can, largely to do with, after looking at the statistical rankings for both teams, they're pretty even all along every stretch of the imagination, from passing attack to rushing attack to rushing defense and passing defense. But except for one, passing defense. Sorry, that's where there's a difference. Uh, Ohio State is the 16th best passing defense, while Georgia is the 51st passing defense. And that's where there is trouble for Georgia. Because they will struggle to stop CJ Stroud through the air. That will give Ohio State the advantage there, and they will be able to put up points early. Now, if they put up points early, I'm thinking that Stetson Bennett is then forced into making more mistakes than Georgia would like because they're going to have to play from behind. And if they're playing from behind, then that plays right into Ohio State's hand. I think what's likely to happen is Stetson Bennett is going to throw at least a pick or two in this game. More than likely two, because I think they're going to be behind and they're going to have to pass to come back at it. They don't normally play from behind because normally they have at least a touchdown or two lead and they can just run the ball on teams and they don't have to put Stetson Bennett into noticeable and obvious passing downs. Now, with them behind in the game, they're going to have to pass more often, and that puts a lot more pressure on that offense and Stetson Bennett. I think in this case, Ohio State's going to take advantage. I think their defense is solid enough to be able to make Bennett have a terrible game. The the only real thing that might make a difference in the beginning of this game will be if George is able to run the ball super effectively. But I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal because Ohio State has overall one of the best defenses and the 23rd best rushing defense. So I think Ohio State is going to be able to put them in check, much like what Ohio State did in the Michigan game early. They had the running attack in check. It wasn't until later in the game when Michigan started passing the ball really well that the running attack started taking off when they got big chunks later in that game. But like I said earlier, I feel that Ohio State losing that game to Michigan was probably the best thing for them. Because not only did they not have to play in the Big Ten championship, but then they got to get healthy, get ready, and figure out what was wrong in that game. I think over the next several weeks that Ohio State game plan this as best they can to be able to beat this Georgia team, and I think they will be able to do it. Ian, give me your thoughts on this game. I'd really like to know who you think is the better prepared for this game.
I agree with you that most of these teams are very even. It's just play calling wise, they are very different. Georgia has, I still believe, regardless of ranking statistics and all that, the best defense in the country, and we have seen them swallow up against elite offenses this year and years past. They shut down Tennessee and Hendon Hooker. They now looking back on it, did an amazing job against Oregon at the beginning of the year. They have obviously, slipped in a few games. They didn't look good against Missouri. They weren't looking too good against Kentucky, and against Kent State, it was a bit, fuzzy at times. But Georgia, it's like a machine with them right now. They just have this script of how to engineer the win. In terms of play calling, when the defense comes up, and then when the offense needs the big play. They've done a good job of that too. Is that you see them, wear teams out, similar to what you mentioned. How State can do that too. They can wear a team down for most of the game, and then once they're tired, that's when they attack and kind of break the line for them. For Ohio State, they have the C.J. Stroud, a great receiving core, and this is easily the best offense Georgia will play. Hendon Hooker in Tennessee definitely have the most prolific, but I think in terms of most complete and pro-ready team, it's Ohio State. So it's going to be up to Georgia to find a way, to stop these playmakers from getting open. But as we saw with, the game against Michigan, and I mentioned this too, is that game against Michigan, Michigan flat out beat them, but Ohio State did a very good job of beating themselves as well. So Ohio State has to find a way to limit the mistakes, and especially for C.J. Stroud, don't be Superman every play. Just make the right play, because Georgia is salivating at any chance at a turnover, and they will capitalize on it. They score so many points off the defense. It is insane, and they'll always give a shorter field for the offense. And for the offense, too, you have Kenny McIntosh at running back. And what I think the play calling will be is that, and we've seen it all year with Georgia, is that Stetson Bennett and Kenny McIntosh attack, where they will get positive yards. The main thing is that they need to find a way to get 3-4 yards per play to make it where it's at least third or second man goal or third man goal, so that it's easier to convert on those short passing plays. Because I think that's what's going to happen, is that they're going to call very high percentage quick passing plays for Bennett, and then they're going to have McIntosh, who we've seen all year, get nothing but positive yards. For that, it's up to Ohio State's defense. They do a good job of preventing big play, especially through the air. But they got to find a way to, stop Georgia from getting more than 2, 3, 4 yards per carry. Because if they're getting up 4, 5, 6 yards on the ground or pass, you're not giving up the first down, but you are making it a lot easier for Georgia. And with that too, we've seen Georgia just have these drives where they just refuse to go off the field, and the defense cannot find a way to stop the Bulldogs. So it's going to be up for Ohio State to maybe find a way to take advantage of those turnovers. The very few that there may be of Georgia. We saw a lot of teams like Tennessee, for example, didn't capitalize on the opportunities Georgia gave them. Missouri as well. So it's going to be really, I think it's going to come down to what team takes advantage of the other team's mistakes first. Yeah, they blink, but who's going to be able to, get the punch in while they blink?
Yeah, and I don't know. I just feel very strongly about this Ohio State team. Like I've said all year, I just feel like they will give the best matchup against Georgia, and I feel that they are the best team and the most likely team to beat them. I don't think TCU or Michigan match up that well against Georgia. I think Georgia would beat either one of those teams. So I think really this is the championship, essentially. With that being said, let's go to our predictions. And we did our predictions earlier, so this will be a little bit easier. But Ian, do you want to stick with your predictions from earlier?
I'm still sticking with my predictions. I have, at least for the Michigan TCU, I think TCU wins. Coming up clutch again on a big play. I think they win 31-30. And I think Georgia's methodical offense eats up time of possession, and Ohio State just can't get enough plays off. I'm going to go with the Bulldogs winning 30-20.
Okay, so for the TCU Michigan game, I feel like TCU is going to take control of the game in the fourth quarter, and they're going to win by like 11 points. And I'm going to say they're going to win 35-24. And then for the Ohio State Georgia game, I'm going to say it's probably going to be Ohio State in the lead most of the game, and I feel that they'll eventually wear them down. And Georgia's going to have to pass, rely on the pass more to try to score. And I think that Ohio State's going to take advantage of that and force Stetson Bennett into making mistakes, and thus I have Ohio State winning 32-24. Okay, that's our predictions. The game is coming up next week on New Year's Eve. This weekend is Christmas. Merry Christmas, everyone. So, but before we go, we're going to give our socials and everything. So you can reach us at haterradio.com. You can reach us at hater_radio on Twitter and Instagram. And you can also reach us at haterradio1@gmail.com as far as email. We'll have articles on haterradio.com regarding the CFP coming up in the next couple of days. Look forward to those. Ian, what are your socials before we go?
Yes, G Gator G on YouTube and G_Gator_G on Instagram.
All right, that's the show, everyone. Look forward to these games, and Merry Christmas, everyone.